Good evening, everybody. Thank you again for joining us for our Parents Unite event. I have the esteemed pleasure of introducing our guest speaker today, Denisha Merriweather. I have her bio. I'm going to read you the first line, and then I think you're going to find out the best is going to come from her, so we're going to let her finish it. But Denisha Merriweather is a politically appointed liaison for youth and school choice-related matters in the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Communication and Outreach. That is why I'm going to let her finish her bio, because that is a mouthful. Denisha comes from a very interesting upbringing. She's going to share with you. She's going to share how when there's a family member that cares, it really helps the child, the student, and she's a perfect example of that. And Denisha, if you'll come up here and finish your bio for me, because it's they're here for you, not for me.
Thank you so much. Down here. Well, thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here with you guys this evening. Like he said, I'm here from the U.S. Department of Education, and I am really pleased to be here to share with you what the President and what the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, has called the civil rights issue of our time. And I just want to send appreciations to Wyoming Liberty Group for all of the work you guys are doing to expand education for all families. As a beneficiary of a tax credit scholarship in Florida, I understand that it is the family's right to choose the best learning environment for their kid, and I hope that all students will be able to exercise that freedom. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, on the east side of Jacksonville, or what's called the urban core. My old neighborhood sits along the St. Johns River, which is just east of downtown. And years before I was born, drugs and alcohol infiltrated the community. Drug abusers and police intervention became a common sight, and the east side became a place people wanted to avoid. The east side became the focus of many urban projects and activities within the city of Jacksonville, but statistics tell a really sad tale. The median household income for the zip code where I grew up in is about half that of the citywide average. According to the latest U.S. Census Bureau data, 41% of East Side residents receive food stamps, and compared with the 16% of Jacksonville residents who receive food stamps. People on the east side know each other by name, and that might not seem very odd here in Wyoming. Community members proudly chant East Side while throwing up the symbol E with their hands. Gatekeepers, or those who maintain East Side culture, claim status if their last name is chanted in the same manner. So it seemed like the Merriweathers had status. My family has lived in poverty for at least 4 generations on the same side of town in the same place, which is not uncommon. My relatives have earned a reputation of defending their own. So while my name may have protected me in the neighborhood, it also followed me into the classroom. One adult might turn around and say, "Oh, she's a Merriweather." And it seemed to justify my behavior and hold me to a stereotype. Many of my teachers have worked in schools, in that school neighborhood for a long time, and so I assumed that they just automatically wrote me off to end up be like my mother and my uncle, who both dropped out of school. During that time, I hated school. I really just became very discouraged and despondent. I lived with my biological mother, and we moved around a lot. We moved about 5 times within one school year. And with every move meant a different school. With every new school, that meant new administrators, new teachers, new classmates, a new school culture. And I never expected to stay in one place very long, so I just automatically assume, okay, well, these rules, they don't apply to me. I remember days I would walk into the classroom and everyone would just sigh, including the teachers. I grew very disheartened, and to hide my hurt, I would lash out into physical fights with my classmates. The principal's office became my new classroom, and D's and F's filled my report card. I'd see statistics that say that I beat the odds. I read about studies who say that students who don't read proficiently by the third grade are 4 times more likely to drop out of high school than those who do. Or those who grew up in poverty are 13 times less likely to graduate from high school. Well, that was me. I grew up in poverty, and I failed the third grade twice. But I was given a chance to try something different. I've written many times and shared many times how school choice changed the trajectory of my life and allowed me to escape the pool of generational poverty. The summer before my 6th grade year, I began to live with my godmother, and she provided me with stability. She enrolled me into a small Christian private school in Florida using the tax credit scholarship program. I didn't have to change schools anymore, and although living with my godmother didn't pull me totally from the culture of the East Side, she made an honest wage, set a good example, believed in me, kept me in church, and gave me structure and discipline. The school was affiliated with the church, which gave me an extended community. My first day of school, I was racked with nervousness and embarrassment. I looked around and I recognized some of the kids from church, and I just automatically knew I'm going to defend myself at all costs, no matter what. And however, to my surprise, I never had to defend myself or my intellect. The students were great. My class sizes were small. My teachers were engaging. In fact, the summer before I started at that small school, a teacher met with me one-on-one to help me increase with my reading, and I didn't know my multiplication facts, so she met with me to help me memorize those. My junior year, I enrolled in a local community college, taking dual enrollment classes. My school had become a major support system for me. Every gap that was there that my family still could not fill, my school was there to fill it. In 2010, in June, I became the first in my family to graduate with a high school diploma, and I resolved in my mind that I would go on to earn every degree I wanted. And today I hold a master's degree in social work. That's why I'm committed to expanding education options for all students. That's why the President and the Secretary of Education wants to expand and stand by parents and give them the right to choose. That's why the work of the Wyoming Liberty Group is so important, and other state-based advocacy organizations. So thank you, Susan, for your leadership and what you're doing to expand choices in Wyoming. The department really appreciates it. So where do we start, and how do we tackle this beast? So we must first work to inform people that students need to be prepared for today's and tomorrow's opportunities. Internationally, the most recent PISA score, the Program for International Student Assessment report, has the United States ranked for 23rd in reading, 25th in science, and 40th in math. And that's like middle of the pack average. Secretary DeVos likes to remind us that in the U.S. Olympics, the Winter Games, the U.S. ranked number 4 in the Olympic Games, and we left the Winter Olympics with the fewest medals we'd ever taken home in more than 20 years. The committee for the U.S. Olympics, they said we have to take a hard look at what went wrong, what happened in South Korea, because we don't want America to settle for mediocrity. Okay, well, if we're able to be content with students scoring at middle of the pack, 23rd, 25th, and 40th, what does that require us to do? This year, NAEP scores show students are underprepared, 2% increase in 4th grade reading. That's stagnation, and that's unremarkable. Meanwhile, per pupil spending for education has risen. We spend more than $1.2 trillion on education. As individuals are becoming more and more aware of the issues that are facing us within the education system, then we need more people to be champions and to advocate inside and outside of the classroom for more innovation. I was given the opportunity to attend a Christian school on a tax credit scholarship. Some people find their way using traditional district public schools. All avenues should be accessible for families. State by state, a growing array of options are being available, becoming more and more available for families. And so I'm going to quickly run through, this crowd seems like you guys know a lot, so I'll mostly do it for the video people, of all of the options that are currently available to parents. So we have district public schools. District public schools are controlled and operated by publicly elected and appointed officials, and it's primarily operated using taxpayer funds. Many parents choose to send their kid to a district school in their neighborhood according to their residentially assignment developed by the school district. In America, choosing where to live is the most common form of education choice. Open enrollment is a public school option available in some states, and this option allows families to attend a school inside or outside of their residentially assigned neighborhood. And depending on the states, the laws differ state to state. This can either be mandatory or voluntary. Most states require open enrollment for low-performing school districts. Magnet schools are the oldest form of school choice. The first fully functional and operated magnet school was in Tacoma, Washington in 1968. Magnet schools are public schools designed to attract students from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, and they focus on specific subjects like STEM or career and technical education, CTE, or interbaccalaureate. Some magnet schools require students to take an entrance exam in order to get into the school, or they have to demonstrate a certain knowledge base or skill in order to qualify to get into the school. Other magnet schools they operate and they accept students based off a lottery. Charter schools are public schools that are funded by taxpayer funds, but are operated independently of the school district. Charter schools allow for educators, parents, students, not students, they can't open a charter school. That would be awesome. Like Vermont, the first kid running for governor at 14, isn't that crazy? Charter schools, which allow for educators, parents, community members, entrepreneurs, business leaders, all the gamut, to be flexible and innovate and provide students with increased opportunities within the public school system. Charter schools are authorized by a higher education institution or nonprofit, independent charter board, state agencies, school districts that monitor their quality and integrity to ensure that they're accountable for academic results and fiscal practices. Charter school laws differ state by state. The first charter school law was enacted in Minnesota in 1991. Currently, there are 44 states and the District of Columbia who have charter laws. Course choice helps to fill gaps within public school systems, and they give high-quality access through a centralized delivery method of diverse courses from multiple providers. The term blended learning is a form of formal education program that leverages both technology and face-to-face instructions. And that might include a combination between online or digital combined with supervised learning time or student-led learning. With students, it provides them more control over their time, pace, and path. Virtual or online learning is exactly what the name implies, where the delivery method is primarily over the internet. With online and virtual learning, that does not include broadcast television or radio, video cassettes, standalone educational software like Leapfrog, or significantly like internet-based instructional approaches like Khan Academy. Depending on the state or the school district, students can enroll in an online comprehensive program or take individual courses. Online virtual schools are really cool and awesome for remote areas where specialized or advanced courses are not physically available in those locales. So for an example, where internet connectivity is available, but faculty are not available to teach like high-end robust sciences, so they can take online chemistry or biology, anatomy. Homeschooling is an option that people are very familiar with, that allows parents to facilitate their child's learning. They have different requirements for homeschooling laws. Private schools have unique missions or education philosophies or curriculum that they want to leverage. And families must typically pay to send their kid to a private school. However, states are becoming more innovative, and there are financial assistance programs that are offered through states or through the private school itself. Other states provide no assistance for families who want to choose a private school for their child. So most of the times when we're talking about education choice, school choice, we're mostly talking about, people are 9 times out of 10 talking about a financial assistance program or funding, not different types of schools or the available options for parents, but funding mechanisms for private schools. The first financial assistance program was a voucher, and it was enacted and created in Milwaukee in 1989. So it's been around pretty long. Currently, 26 states and the District of Columbia offer some type of financial assistance programs, giving more families options to choose all different types of schools for their child. And these vary from vouchers to tax credits to education savings accounts, individual tax deductions or credits, and 529 savings plans. There are some similarities among the state financial assistance programs, but no 2 programs are the same. And so I'm going to quickly walk through those again. Vouchers are payments from a state government to provide private schools students to choose them. Some states provide scholarships to special populations, including low-income students or students with low-income families and students with special needs. A state tax credit scholarship program is kind of like a voucher, but instead of the money coming from the state coffers, those funds are privately raised from donors. At a state level, individuals or businesses may contribute to a nonprofit organization, and those nonprofit organizations then provide scholarships to eligible students. Contributors may then receive a tax credit from their state. The largest tax credit scholarship program is in Florida, and they have about 100,000 students this year. An education savings account, or ESA for short, provides families with an account of public funds that can be used on multiple different education expenses, including private schools, private school tuition, online learning programs, tutoring, special education programs, curriculum services, dual enrollment, learning programs. The opportunities are pretty much limitless. and many other state-authorized uses for those. Unused funds in ESAs are often carried forward to pay for future education expenses. In some instances, ESAs can be carried all the way up to college. ESAs empower families with the ability to fully customize their education. It's like shopping, putting in kind of what they want to meet their child's unique needs and abilities. Individual tax credits or tax deductions allow parents to receive a tax credit or tax deduction for education-related expenses, including deductions for private school payments, transportation costs, education school supplies, which is the most common. You save all your receipts, you take them when you do your income tax, and you can get a tax deduction or credit for those. Tax credits lowers the total amount that's due that a person owes, and a deduction reduces the amount of a person's taxable income. 529 plans, which have been around for a very long time but are new to the K-12 space, allows families across the country to now save money while earning tax-free interest to pay for future education expenses. 529 plans are sponsored by state and state agencies or education institutions and are authorized by the section of the 529 in the IRS code, the Internal Revenue Code. It was not until the Tax Cuts and Job Act of 2017 that the administration allowed for those expenses to be qualified for K-12. And so these financial assistance programs have certain eligibility. And so not all students, there's only one program that gives all students access, but for the most part, eligibility for financial assistance programs are implemented to serve a specific students' needs. Means tested eligibility programs are designed to serve students who are from low-income backgrounds, such as the DC Opportunities Scholarship, which is a voucher. Means preferenced eligibility programs means that they give a preference to low-income students from low-income backgrounds. So those who are from low-income backgrounds, they get those first dibs, and then everybody else goes next. Special needs eligibility is exactly what it says. Those persons who have special needs are eligible for those programs. And universal eligibility means anybody from any background, all students, regardless of your parent status or the student's ability, have the freedom to choose. And there are some handouts in the back that has all of these lists, and I know it's like a mouthful, probably not going to remember all the intertwinings, but there are handouts in the back. And as you likely know, these are a lot of options. The menu is full of options, and there are still some that are to come. We have people who are saying that they're creating a lot of Skype virtual classrooms where people will be able to put on a reality, a VI, and be able to be in a classroom, which is pretty cool. So there are different things that are being invented every day, and so we're got to keep the options open. And Wyoming is missing out on a lot, but there's still hope and there's still time. Education choice is, like I said, not just limited about this school building versus this other building over here using a voucher or a scholarship, public versus private, parochial versus charter, or homeschool versus virtual. Choice in education is way, way bigger than that. It's about freedom to choose, freedom to learn differently, freedom to explore, freedom to fail and to get back up, freedom to find the best way that students learn and grow, and find exciting and engaging combinations to excite every child, freedom to innovate. What works best in Florida may not work best in Wyoming. What works best in Cheyenne may not be what's best in Casper. The recent 529 expansion speaks to a spot where Washington exercised and stuck to a spot that was appropriate. We did our appropriate role in education. And the secretary has every intention of sticking to an appropriate role in education now. So education needs to be a local decision. And that's why families and states should be free to pursue different avenues that lead each child to reach their fullest potential. A top-down solution from DC would only grow government, and we would have to create a new office to oversee private school scholarships or scholarship organization, another office staffed with unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats tasked with making decisions for families who should be free to do those things themselves. So you might think to yourself, well, here in Wyoming, local rulemaking and decisioning has not really worked out to our benefit. And I know you guys are struggling. The first charter law was passed only 5 years after the first ever charter law was passed in 1991. And you guys only have 4 charters, which is sad. And it's not right, and there's a lot of work to be done. So I flip it back, What have you done since 1991 when the first charter law was passed, or in 1995 when Wyoming passed their charter law, or in 2017 when the administration said that they're committed to expanding education opportunities for all students? There needs to be a rising up of parents, of community members, of students, of teachers, of advocates who've had enough, just enough, united parents who are willing to challenge the status quo inside and outside of the classroom. So I encourage you to think of ways to innovate, think outside of the box, rethink school so that nothing limits a child from reaching his or her fullest potential. And so in order to rethink school, here are some questions to kind of get your mind jogging, get those gears churning. Why do we group students by age? Why do schools close for the summer? Why must the school day start at the rise of the sun? Why do students go to a school building in the first place? Why can't a student learn at his or her own pace? Why isn't technology more widely embraced? Why do we limit what a student learns based on the faculty and the facilities that are available? Why aren't more business leaders investing in the education system? School choice is just one of the avenues to help students succeed. As a social worker, I know that it's completely important for there to be a healthy community, a stable home environment, and individuals who can mentor students. So I encourage you to take a holistic approach inside and outside of the classroom. I encourage you to look for ways to innovate at a state and local level. And so I'm closing out with the speech part, and I do want to do an activity with you guys to hear your feedback. The mantra of the secretaries is rethinking school. And I often do this activity with some of the student groups and parent groups that come into the department, and to get them to think about what are your dreams and aspirations for school. If you could start with a blanket scale with something, I know Poder's is here, and so when we look at school, what are your hopes and aspirations? If you could do a school, if you had your own a magic wand, how would schools look? I was telling them, I went to lunch with some of the staff at Wyoming Liberty Group, and I did this exercise. One girl, she was in the 5th grade, and she said, I want my school to be in a tree house, and we can be in a garden all the time. And it was like, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. That's definitely rethinking school. We had one kid who was like, oh yeah, well, we can go to the moon and we can have class on the moon. It was like, that's a great idea, But it's allowing people to be empowered. And if you have an idea and you're constantly asking those why questions, and then you get to a place where you ask a why question and then you're not able to actually complete your idea. So the moon is a bit of a stretch, but having school in a treehouse, that's pretty doable, you know? Sending kids outside to learn outside and for them to be in a garden, that's doable. So how do we get there? So ideas, what is your ideal school? Any volunteers?
That's a good question. As a volunteer, I've taught in our church cafeteria and really enjoyed it. And I think the kids enjoyed it too. So, church cafeteria.
Cool. So a school in a cafeteria?
I want to say, because I've been a teacher since 1974, that we really do, and we really always have tried to implement some of the things you've suggested. I know that we, at times when the school would allow and the weather was nice, we'd bring the kids outside, sit on the ground in a circle and have class out there. We would have field trips. If it was a science class, you could go to the creek several blocks away and take pond samples and water samples and leaves and things. So we really do try to do that. In a garden, I know that the master gardeners here in Cheyenne have tried to support and promote gardens at our elementary schools. The problem happened, we did have a few. You know, it's a big project to get the soil set up and the built up areas, but then they have to be watered all summer when no one is in school, and you had to set up people to be there, and so it became difficult. So we don't have very many because of that, but we do try to have gardens, and we now have a children's botanic garden, and we do try to have classes there too for kids to go have field trips there. I'm just trying to tell you that we are trying to do some of the things that you are suggesting. The own pace is something that is being discussed quite a bit, and people working in groups, and they talk about group student-led, which I have a problem with that, a personal problem with that, because I think sometimes we expect students to teach the other students because they might move a little faster, but they're just kids too and just students too, so that becomes a difficult. There is a question about start times. I know we're always talking about that. That's always debated. Why do we close in the summer? Well, I've talked to so many teachers about that, about versus year-round schooling and the different breaks they take. The teachers feel like they would just be dead if they couldn't have 2 months to rest or to take the coursework that's required for their certification, things like that. So I know it started many years ago when the ranchers had to work in the summer, have their kids to help them. But anyway, so those are just some thoughts I had.
Well,
I could go on, but I wanted to just share.
What's your ideal school though?
Well, a beautiful environment. I'd like it to be more fair. Some of our schools are very run down and really in bad condition, and then we have brand new beautiful schools. But I would like all the kids to have a beautiful school to be in.
I think we have to remember that everybody is a teacher and that every moment is a teaching moment. So I think for people to think that they're the teacher and that everything happens in the school is a bit presumptuous. And so I think having respect for the learning and teaching process in all human interaction, the parents are the first teachers, they're most important really. The first 3 years are crucial. And then, of course, the school system complains that parents haven't done their job. But But I think appreciation of the human ability to teach in all situations is very important.
So I would say in a much broader sense, the type of school that I envision is one that's held in high esteem by the community. I think the unfortunate reality is that a lot of schools aren't the safe place that they used to be. And so schools are having to face a lot of problems that they didn't have to face before. And I don't think that the community holds their schools in the same regard. I don't know where, throughout our history that attitude started to change from the public. But I know teachers don't get the respect a lot of times, from the community and even from the parents. And so I just wish, it just kicked in. I just wish, when I envision a school, an ideal environment, I envision a school that's held in high esteem, by the surrounding community and given the respect that it needs.
You got to remember, respect's a two-way street. All right? There's too many administrators, and that's the problem. We need to go back and get out of this cookie-cutter programs that this district has gotten into. Not everybody fits into the little square hole. There's kids that, can learn something. Then you got world learners, visual learners. And that's the problem. The districts are just, okay, this is what we're doing. Everybody's got to fit into this. And like I said, I don't know who you are, but respect's a two-way street. The teachers have to respect the parents. Not every parent's going to be the same.
So what's your ideal learning environment?
My ideal learning environment should be, take the student and see how that student learns, and then move them students into them categories. If they're a visual learner, put them in there.
I'd take the mic at, I've been homeschooling for 14 years, and in one sense, we have among the freest states in the country to do what we please. The Wyoming homeschool law gives me broad freedom to teach as I like to teach, what I like to teach, what I believe best benefits my children, as long as I pay for it. And so I don't want to lose that under any circumstances.
So you're saying you would rather maintain your freedom than take public funds?
Well, I was a student at Grove City College in the years when the government was saying if students got the Pell Grant, that was indirect federal aid, and therefore the government could tell the college what to do and not do. And that school, along with Hillsdale, still doesn't take government money. What I'm saying is the ideal learning environment is a place where, as Ms. Gore was saying, every family is a learning environment. Every moment is a learning environment, and we surround the children with resources. I'm not saying that a large percentage of the $15,000 per student we spend in Wyoming to educate a child couldn't go back to parents who are teaching the children or to private schools that are teaching the children, provided that it doesn't come with strings attached. But that's a hard thing for the legislature to figure out, given the Supreme Court decisions in the Grove City case and others. But that's peripheral. I'm not sure even how you knew that that was a concern of mine, because I wasn't expressing it. Families that are dedicated to the education of their children is a huge thing in terms of learning environment. So we're back to Daniel Patrick Moynihan in 1969 saying, when the family is destroyed, then the culture will go. And so the ideal learning environment is a place where students are surrounded with truth, goodness, and beauty.
So yeah, I think you raised a lot of interesting points, which are really great. In the homeschool community, you're right, a lot of practices in curriculum and ownership, empowerment, and a lot of homeschool families and organizations that support homeschool families have really worked hard to maintain that control. I think that, and this kind of crosses different types of education, learning tools and services on how do we share best practices. So how do we share best practices from the district schools with charter schools, with homeschools, with private schools? How do we share best practices from those who've been doing homeschooling for a long time, those organizations, those curriculums with the other types of school models? We've worked in silos for a really long time. And education kind of spans the gamut. You know, students are human beings that come into a classroom with multiple issues. Somebody said it. The opioid crisis is a big deal. School safety is a big deal. Some of the issues that school safety pose are not just happening within the school building, they're happening within the environment and the community where students are coming from. So how do we collectively collaborate to fix the education system and to educate students and share those best practices with our counterparts? I think a lot of times we're threatened or we fear the competition. And we think that, oh, they're taking our students, or, you know, they're threatening. But we're all trying to reach the end goal, which is educating students. So how do we best do that? And how do we begin to rethink school and to think outside of the box, outside of what we've been used to for so long? And it's easier for me to say it because I'm not in the classroom with teachers day to day who are dealing with these today conversations. How do I get my kids food? How do I make sure that my kids are coming to school clean? He's crying right now, you know. Some of the conversations that are gifted, I think it's 200 times low-income kids and kids who are minority are 200 times less likely to be identified as gifted, because most of them are in low-performing schools where schools are compounded with so many other issues, and one of them is not identifying a kid as gifted. So how do we continually, you know, make sure that we are rethinking school when there are so many other things to be concerned about? So I charge you guys to continue with that conversation, to continue to look and ask why. Kids do it all the time. They are constantly like, that doesn't make sense. I don't get it. Why do we do it? And we just say, because. So how can we now, in the positions of power that we've all obtained, continue to ask why and challenge the status quo?
Coming from the federal government, this is so very refreshing, because we've had federal program after federal program that hasn't worked and has been expensive, and now we have a wonderful story coming from the Department of Education, which you're even open-minded to getting rid of at some point. Yeah. But it's really very refreshing, so thank you so much.
Department of Education, their main emphasis is power instead of the kids. And we watch our school district here, and that's what it's all about. And so many seem like they could, I understand the kids want, or the teachers would like to educate the kids, but they're told how to educate the kids, what they have to teach them, to indoctrinate them, what they should think. And it's all an issue of power. It's all about the upper echelons of the school district, their big offices, their big salaries, their big retirements, and we need more money, more money, more money, and that doesn't flow down to the kids. And what I tell people, if you had a not so good mechanic or a not so good dentist, if you paid him twice as much, would your service or would that increase? No, it's the same thing with the school. You can dump all the money into it you want. It's like any place else in the government, they're going to find a way to spend it, and it's not going to be on the kids. So.
And I just say from a historical perspective, there was a time whenever the Department of Education and the states allowed local school boards to make decisions that were different than other local school boards. So in some senses, there was a time in America when different communities had different schools because they had different cultures and because they had different commitments. So a school in Iowa might look different than a school in Washington, D.C., than a school in Boston. And there was room to innovate even just in the public school system because there was no top-down control from above, and because there wasn't any money from above. So the Department of Education could determine to stop that if it were consistent, I suppose, with laws that's imposed upon them. But one of the things that could happen is Washington could just stop and allow local communities to do what local communities determine to do.
Poder, and we just renewed their charter. But I will tell you that we've only had I've been on the school board for 8 years, and only 2 groups applied to us. And the second one was Poder, and they got their school. The first group fell apart. They applied, but then they fell apart, and they couldn't really do it. So it really isn't that we don't want them. They just haven't come forward and looked into it or requested to do it. So you should know that, you know, because it's amazing to me that that's all we've had.
Any more ideas or thoughts on how we improve education, or some of the specific social issues that's specific to Wyoming that could help, that we should bridge into the education system, or might be a unique lens to helping out the education system? Agriculture, apprenticeships for different industry positions.
We are working to ask every place where school opportunities grow. There's always a group within the civil part of society that supports it. That's why we're asking parents to unite. That's why we're encouraging this kind of participation. I think Secretary DeVos says that parents of means can afford various opportunities for their children. Parents of less means do need the funding to come through the school. And as Tom here has said, oftentimes the system itself loses track of the student and gets more self-occupied with its funding. And so, however that is true, I know sometimes there's success in the public schools as well. But now, if you open up the opportunities in Wyoming, specifically, first of all, always defend the freedom of the homeschooler and the private school to have their sovereignty. Then there are opportunities to have a better charter school law, and there are opportunities to have education scholarships, and there are opportunities as Holly here to do the virtual education, which is a kind of a combination of homeschooling and provision from the funds and materials from the public school, so that we do have plenty of places to move forward. We're not lacking ideas, and so I think we just invite people to participate and take advantage of some of these opportunities.
No, and it's such a pleasure. As always, you guys have allies at the Department of Education. If there are any things, any questions you have, please let us know. We are always willing to lend a helping hand. We are in a very different position. We want to give more control back to parents, back to families. And we do think that that is different than prescribed, which has been constantly from the federal government. It's always been, here's what you do, here's what you do. And so we are inviting a lot of people to have freedom in the conversation and giving parents power to choose the best option for their kid. And if they can't do that, then constantly asking why, and making sure that they are able to take advantage of all the options that they have. So, thank you so much. Have a great one.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you. Before we let you completely off the hook, though, everybody here has had a chance to speak and ask questions, but we did have Facebook Live feed going. Cool. So we'll have the opportunity real quick before we let you go to see if there was questions from Facebook that Denisha could answer.
We had a Facebook Live comment from Janelle Moore. She says, I opened a private school learning center in Casper so that those kids doing the virtual learning have a place to go when parents can't stay home with them. As a teacher, I felt it was important to have. I'm excited to see where it leads. I hope soon to have a charter school and look forward to learning about more information about the process. Blackmore Academy of Casper. So we wanted to make sure and share that. We had a question from Facebook Live. Where have you seen school choice policies work?
Yeah, so I am definitely pretty biased. I think Florida is a really great example of how the bubble is really bursting with more options every day, well, every legislative cycle, I should say. And so started out with Jeb Bush, you know, in like proposing the first scholarship program, and it was shut down. It was shot down, I should say. And then a few years afterwards, a tax credit scholarship was proposed, and it's been flourishing ever since. It's the largest in the country. Now there's scholarships, reading scholarships for students who are reading below grade level. Students can get $500 to get a type of education assistance to help them improve their reading. And then they also have bullying scholarships where students who have been bullied can get a scholarship to go to a different school. They also have special needs ESAs. And so they also have two different types of special needs scholarships, an ESA and a tax credit scholarship. Voucher. So Florida really has a lot of different charter schools are there, and then you have homeschool, you have district public schools, virtual schools, and so the options are in Florida, I think, have really grown over the years and are giving families a lot more options. I say the other state, which is really impressive, which is that I'm really impressed by, that's in a stagnant position right now, is Nevada. Nevada passed a universal ESA. The scholarship has not been funded yet by legislature, so it's still held up. But I think that that's a state that's really, really interesting.
We had a follow-up comment from Janelle. She said, yes, I can't find scholarships for my specific learning center. It is so new that it doesn't fit criteria of what is out there. Families do have to pay for it. Hopefully in the future, more scholarships will be available for my kind of learning center. Do you have any thoughts on that?
And she's in Casper, right?
Yes.
Sorry, nope. That's unfortunate. I mean, those are the type of questions that you want to constantly ask, and, you know, constantly ask. May have this group, Parents Unite, is a really great group to ask those questions if options aren't on the table within your state or within your city. You know, that's a good question to ask. Why?
One more question. What benefits do public schools get out of this?
Yeah, I think this is an opportunity where everyone wins. And if you're thinking about, I would kind of rephrase that question. We are not in the business of serving schools. We're in the business of serving students. And so if a school is not teaching children, our children are failing, then we need to figure something out. But if are in a system where students are achieving and students are learning, then we've done our job by students. So I'm not gonna answer that question how it was posed, but I am gonna say we're not in the business of infrastructures. We're in the business of educating kids. And so I think that's the mindset that we kind of have to get out of when we're talking about different types of school. We're actually trying to figure out the best way to educate a child.
When I was campaigning, going door to door, I'd run into teachers and I'd talk about school choice. And sometimes there was a little pushback, a kind of defensive mode that some of the teachers would get into, especially with charter schools or homeschools. They would want the schools to follow the same kind of structure, rules, and guidelines as you call the district public schools. So if you can touch on that, number one, why should they do that? Because if they did, they'd have their children in public schools. And then another question would be the tax dollars following the child. So instead of my money going into the pot of money that there is, wherever that pot is, but have it follow the child, stay with the parent so that they could educate their child with that money. Can you answer those questions?
So let me make sure I have it right. So first question is, how do we combat the talking point that this school has to mirror another school, or accountability, do the same type of assessment, do the same thing? Yeah, I think if we're constantly trying to do something different, and then you are proposing that we do the same thing, that kind of defeats the purpose of doing something different, right? So it's a great question. How I would deal with it, I would say it just like that. Like, well, how would that be different from what we already have? Really, the only thing that you changed was the structure, the building. You just put one over there. So it is tough to do that because people don't want to relinquish their power, their control, and there's a lot of trust that needs to be built in order to do that. So there are informal things and things that are not attached to policy that can be done, forming relationships with people, letting them know that you have the best interest for students, constantly ingraining we're all trying to reach the same path. We just have different ways of getting there, but we're still trying to get kids to this to this target, and we might have different ways of getting there, but we're all trying to get there, and every student is different. Every student needs something different, and we can't make a fish try to climb a tree. So we need to create oceans or rivers, if I want to go to use that analogy to. And then your second question, I forgot it. Yeah, it's the way things have worked for so long. And to give parents power, to give them ownership over how they educate their kid will require for them to be in charge of sending their tax dollars where they want. And allowing donors to do the same, donors to be able to fund different types of learning tools, and the same for industry leaders, allowing them to be engaged in the conversation. And teachers, that Susan touched on, allowing teachers to be able, everyone is a teacher in their own right and way. So how do we leverage teacher choice, and allowing teachers the opportunity to innovate and move up in the rank of their district school, which hasn't been something that's been possible yet.
When we were growing up, they weren't teaching to a test. And we've lost our extracurricular. We've lost a lot of the arts due to funding, teaching to the test. Things have fallen to the wayside. And we've lost the well-rounded kids again. And I think my ideal school environment is for us to be able to get back to a place where our kids aren't just teaching to a test, just so they can pass a test, so that they can learn whatever it is their strength is. Each of our kids, I have 4 children, and each have a different strength. And over the years, the classes, the quality of classes, the things they need to conduct those classes have fallen to the wayside in the name of teaching for the test, teaching to a test. And my ideal school environment would be to bring those things back so that each child can flourish in whatever their strengths are. Not everybody's strength is in math or science. It's in auto mechanics. It's in home economics. It's in swimming. It's in, going outside and digging into the ground and getting into geology, whatever their strength is, we have really gotten away from that. My ideal school environment is that we can teach. My other thought is, one of the things that frustrates me so greatly is the school districts buy products, and I get the tech companies want to make their money. But I think there needs to be a way to leverage the tech companies, because what happens and it's happened to our kids here, is they buy a product, they create this cookie cutter program around it, but because that product costs so much money, that reading program, they can't buy multiple products because of the cost. Now, I know my son's been working on one through the summer that has been phenomenal, because he didn't advance for 3 years in the program the school had, but they found one. They had a temp license to work on. But to buy one license, it's $15,000. $500,000 to do the whole district. And it's a phenomenal program. There needs to be a way to leverage with the tech companies to bring some of those costs down so that districts aren't stuck buying one program or two programs, because kids, like my son, did not learn with those programs, but this one he is. They need to be able to buy multiple programs to fit the way the children learn. So I think that would be phenomenal if there was a way for the tech companies to bring some of those costs down so the districts can afford more than one or two programs. Because the cookie cutter programs, we've gotten to the cookie cutter programs, again, it's gotten away from individuality and helping kids develop those well-rounded skills.
Yeah, I think we've exhausted all of our questions. I think you should continue the conversation. And maybe that's with someone who is a skeptic. Or maybe you're a skeptic yourself. Sorry, all the questions were encourageable to me. I don't think anything was. So I would say continue the conversation. This is just a beginning point. This is number 2 in the series, I think, right? So let the conversation continue. I hear that there are some parents in the room, but I think the activation and the fire under the loins of many other parents needs to happen where they are in these conversations. And maybe you pose the hard questions that you are not willing to have parents answer, with them. If you were given $10,000, $15,000, would you send your kid somewhere else and hear what they say? Or if you had $15,000, how would you educate your kid? Would you do anything differently? And what would you do differently? And hearing their thoughts. And maybe those are the sparks and the venues and the outlets on how we reach that end goal. So continue to rethink school, and I encourage you guys, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Denise. All right, thank you, everybody. Our event has ended, but we don't want the conversation to end. So any questions for us, we're available. Wyoming Liberty Group, give us a call.